The scholar's legs locked, 4 hooves planted against the living wood floor of the grand library, as if the grain beneath her might split open, and her antlers, already stress-fractured at the base, shed a fine powder of calcium onto the open star chart below. The unmarked region stared back. Larger than every map civilization combined, it held no name, no species designation, no color, nothing. If you've ever stared at a map and felt the blank spaces watching you back, you're already part of this story. What was hiding in that silence? Stay with us, we're going to find out. That same pale dust. Ellen had first noticed it on her antlers 3 days ago, standing in the acquisitions chamber while a junior clerk logged a crate of human-provided reference texts. Unremarkable morning. Routine shipment. She had started with the star charts because they were simple. Cartography required no cultural context, no interpretive framework, lines and coordinates. Safe territory for a Glade scholar whose specialty was comparative civilizational development, not xenolinguistics. The charts were beautiful too. Humanity's mapmakers favored clean geometry, circles within circles, territories shaded in gradients that made galactic borders look almost organic. Ellen spread the largest chart across the reading table, a slab of polished heartwood that had been growing in the Grand Library for 600 years. Every known civilization appeared in its proper place. The Sylvani Glade Concord, modest and green. The Vorn Collective, ancient and gray. 47 other species, each with their colored territory, their borders, their labeled homeworlds. And then the blank. It occupied the chart's lower left quadrant. No shading, no labels, no dotted lines suggesting disputed claims or unexplored regions. Just empty coordinate space, stretching across a region that, if she was reading the scale correctly, dwarfed every other territory on the chart combined. Ellen's data stylus hovered over it. She checked the legend. Nothing. She cross-referenced the human index. The coordinates existed. They simply weren't assigned to anyone. She pulled the first human history text from the crate. By the end of the 2nd chapter, her rear hooves had begun to shift. By the 4th, her ears lay flat against her skull. The timeline was wrong. It had to be wrong. Human civilization did not begin where the galactic registry indicated. It began further back, much further, and it did not proceed in a single unbroken line. It stuttered. It rose and crashed and rose again, and each peak was higher than the last, and each collapse should have been extinction. Behind her, the reinforced stone floor of the Vorn diplomatic quarter groaned as Ambassador Torun lowered himself onto a reading bench. The massive figure had been silent for an hour, working through a separate human text. Now his voice came low and grinding. "Scholar, these world wars, how many did the humans have?" "2," Ellen said without looking up. "Only 2?" A sound like gravel settling. "We had 9. Humans had 2. Ellen turned a bark page. Her hoof scraped the floor. Then they invented weapons capable of ending their entire species. They stopped having world wars because the 3rd one would have made their planet uninhabitable. Silence. When she glanced back, fine micro cracks had spread across Torun's left cheek, splintering outward from his jaw like frost on stone. She kept reading. One of humanity's collapsed civilizations, 4,000 years before the current one, had produced theoretical work on harnessing fast radio bursts as directed energy weapons. The science was sound. A single FRB releases as much energy in milliseconds as a star produces in 80 years. The civilization that conceived this had turned that math into engineering schematics before it fell. Current humans had inherited the research. Their assessment, noted in academic sidebar, interesting but impractical. The species that stories like this one are really about. The ones who survive what should end them. They always leave traces. Tomorrow's story has traces too. Ones nobody was meant to find. Ellen's forelimbs trembled, not fatigue. Freeze response. Every Sylvani recognized it. The body's oldest override. Older than language, older than spaceflight. Prey loss protocol. Legs lock. Antlers angle down. Heart rate drops. The body prepares to be still enough that the predator passes. Gravity hadn't changed, but standing required a decision now, a conscious effort that hadn't been necessary 3 seconds ago. Her knees understood something. Her brain was still processing. She turned another bark page. The human concept of dark ages stared up at her. Periods where civilization did not merely stall, it regressed. Technology lost, knowledge forgotten. Cities reclaimed by vegetation and weather. And then, from the wreckage, new civilizations climbing out of the ruins of the old, carrying fragments of what came before. This had happened multiple times. Ellen set the text down, picked it up again. Her data stylus had stopped working at some point. She couldn't remember when. The living wood table beneath the chart had begun to curl slightly at its edges, responding to the calcium dust falling from her antlers the way heartwood always responded to distress chemicals. Even the library knew something was wrong. She moved to the next volume, thinner, denser, a human educational text, the kind distributed to adolescents, introductory material. She opened it near the back and found a section on civilizational theory, a dry overview of rise and fall patterns written in language so plain it could have been a trade manual. At the bottom of one page, a footnote. Every empire thinks it's the exception. None of them are. Not a declaration, not a warning carved into a monument. A footnote. A statistical observation tucked beneath a chart of collapsed polities, written in the same tone a human might use to note that water freezes at 0 degrees. Ellen read it twice. The words were not angry or proud. They carried the weight of a species that had watched itself die over and over and had, at some point, stopped being surprised by it. She looked at the star chart still spread across the reading table. Torun had moved closer. His shadow fell across the unmarked region, and the micro cracks along his face had deepened, branching down his neck and across one massive shoulder. He said nothing. He was reading over her shoulder, and his stone skin was answering for him. And now her legs locked again, all 4 hooves rooted to the living wood floor, antlers shedding in earnest. Not dust this time, flakes. Her body executing its oldest emergency protocol, dumping calcium reserves it might need later because every prey instinct she possessed had reached the same conclusion simultaneously. The unmarked territory on the chart was not empty. It was full of them. Human civilizations that had risen, dominated their world, developed technologies that could have conquered the galaxy and then collapsed before they ever reached space. Empires that burned, kingdoms that drowned, societies that forgot their own names. Each one, individually, would have been the most powerful civilization the Glade Concord had ever encountered. The current humans were not humanity's first attempt. They were the survivors, the civilization that had outlasted every version of itself. And they had marked that graveyard of predecessors with nothing. No memorial, no border, no color on the chart. Because to them, those weren't civilizations. They were practice rounds. Torun's entire surface cracked. A sound like a dry riverbed splitting in summer heat filled the Vorn quarter, and the ambassador lowered himself to the reinforced floor slowly, the way very old things settle when they finally understand what they are looking at. Ellen's stylus rolled off the table and clattered against the wood. She did not pick it up. Her eyes stayed on the chart, on that vast blankness where the graves were, and her antlers shed their last flake of calcium onto the border between the mapped galaxy and everything humanity had already conquered and lost and never bothered to name. The heartwood curled around it, held it, grew quiet. That blank space on the chart, the one bigger than every known civilization combined. What would you have done if you'd found it first? Come back tomorrow. We'll be here, and so will the stories that keep you asking questions like that.